Hey everybody, Jake Perez here with Onward, my weekly show dedicated to helping ordinary people live extraordinary lives. You can catch me live right here, usually on Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Central Time, as I speak with some of the world's most interesting people about a variety of topics, all dedicated to helping you change your life forever. My guest on the show tonight is Natalie E. West. Natalie is a clinical psychotherapist joining me all the way from down under in Australia. For over 12 years now, Natalie has dedicated her life to helping busy men and women all over the world to successfully navigate their way through love, life, and careers. In addition to her work as a behavioral therapist, Natalie is also a highly sought-after motivational speaker, specializing in self-image, mental wellness, and relationships. Tonight, I'm honored to have Natalie as my special guest to shed some light on one of those topics that a lot of people, myself included, seem to just not be able to figure out. And of course, I'm talking about relationships. Natalie, welcome to
Hi.
Onward.
Hi, Jake. How you doing?
Hey, I am doing wonderful. I appreciate you coming and hang out with me here tonight.
Thank you.
So, I just kind of introduced you here, and this is actually the second show I'm doing on relationships, and for me, it's one of those things where really, I think, everybody's either they're in a relationship or they're looking for a relationship or they're like, never again, I'm not doing that, and they're running from relationships, right? I mean, that kind of covers almost everyone, right? I mean, so I just brought you, look, I've struggled like everyone else in relationships over the years. And, I want to shed some light. I want you to help us figure this thing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on. And thank you for that amazing intro. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
Um, one of the biggest things I think when we come to the words, even the word relationship, most people's mind, like even if you think about the word, your mind will automatically go external the minute that you hear the word relationship, because that's literally the way that we're programmed.
Mm-hmm.
So really, my role and what I really love to do is to teach people how their minds work, why they do what they do, especially in relationships. That's consciousness and unconscious, and really understand that, when we go external in relationships, we're actually missing the part that's really important, which is the relationship with ourselves and our own self-image. So that's kind of where we start and understand the programming and what that actually means and how our minds actually define what a relationship actually is, which is actually really interesting.
It really is. I mean, the word relationship is just super broad, right? And I had a pastor friend of mine come on last week, and when I first asked him to come on, I said I want to talk about relationships, and he was like, "Well, what kind of relationships, right?" Because we've got relationships at work and with our parents and with our children and all these different things. Of course, you brought up a very good point. Is there's also the relationship with ourselves, right?
Yes.
And you do a lot of work on self-image and things like that. And one of the things you talked to me about before this show was the fact that in our relationships, and of course we're talking about romantic relationships tonight is really the focus, but in that we bring with us baggage, right? Good or bad or whatever. And tell me a little bit about that. I mean, where does it start, and how does that affect us?
So really a lot of the people that seek me out and, the conversations that I have around relationships as in an intimate relationship with a partner is really about behavioral patterns and relationship patterns. And a lot of people will say to me like, oh my gosh, I keep attracting the same type of people. Like, why does this keep happening to me? Or these people are really unhealthy. And really what it comes back to is the crucial part of it, Jake, is really understanding how your mind works and why it does what it does and how we actually are programmed. So one of the most important things for everyone watching today is to understand that we have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. And literally between the age of 0 to 7, our unconscious programs are actually devised by our guardians, which literally are our parents, our religion, our state, and our environment. So if you think between the age of 0 to 7, your head's like literally a video camera and your eyes the lens to the world. So as a child too, we don't have the cognitive ability to filter off anything that doesn't serve us at the highest level. We also learn what our belief structures are around love, external. So anytime too, when I'm speaking about particular words, it'll be interesting for your viewers. When I use the word love or relationships, it normally goes external. So immediately we're externally validating ourselves through love and relationships. However, that's what we learn. And by the time you're 7, your self-image has actually been built and developed, especially when it comes to love and relationships. Because if you think about it, the way that your lens is so your conscious mind is the lens, everything goes in and is literally laid down as a foundation in what I call memory groups in our unconsciousness. Now, what's the first relationship you see as a child?
Well, it's going to be with your parents, your mother, most likely.
Correct. So the first experience you have in relationships is your mum and your dad, or your caregivers if you didn't grow up with your mum and your dad. So what happens is your unconscious mind also doesn't think. It's like a laptop on a computer. It's just a hard drive. So that is laid down as the potential foundation for what a relationship looks like. So it's not uncommon that a lot of people that I've worked with that say, my gosh, I've married my dad or my mom. Have you heard that before?
Sure, of course. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is we also have external validation through that relationship that we learn around love. So that's why a lot of people tend to seek out relationships, because we also learn from our caregivers. Well, we actually don't learn. I'll take that back a step, about how to actually validate ourselves and how to actually have a relationship with ourselves, which we don't learn. We are not programmed that way. We are programmed to seek external validation in our relationships.
Okay, so it's fascinating to me, and I get this concept that, how we think about relationships when we're adults is formulated very, very early on. And I've had this discussion with different people. Do we need to be in relationships sometimes before these things, these dormant things that are in us, before they come out? I mean, or is that something that people work through without being in relationships? I've heard it both ways. Some people say, you really got to, work on yourself before you can be, good in a relationship. Other people, I've heard it say, look, you need a relationship to kind of mirror, what you're dealing with. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm a very big believer in the fact that, anything external in our world is a mirror image of our internal world. So, not even just apart from talking about the way our conscious mind and our unconscious mind works, we're also energetic beings. We produce energy. So whenever, you're either looking for a relationship or even unconsciously, you've really got to make sure that you're not actually filling any emotional voids with an external person to either make you feel better, to make you happier, to fix you. Because, we've all heard, well, when I find the right person or when I get the right job, my life will be better.
Sure.
It doesn't work like that.
Of course.
We've got to go inside. We've got to understand the intimacy within ourselves to be able to have a really awesome, intimate relationship externally.
And I mean, wouldn't one of the questions I just had I didn't write any questions down, but one of the questions off the top of my head I had for you was, what are we doing wrong, right? I mean, I don't know the numbers in Australia, but I know in the US, the divorce rates are approximately 50%. I mean, is that true in Australia as well, or are the rates similar?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
And the reason why a lot of that comes back to, once again, people not understanding how to be on their own first. So one thing in relationships that's really important, and it's something I speak about all the time, particular patterns are lessons unlearned. So if you have particular patterns that are showing up in your life with particular
Mm-hmm.
people, they may all look different facially, but underneath, your
Mm-hmm.
behavior patterns are all the same.
Hmm.
So what we've got to do, and this becomes also around our conscious awareness. So your conscious mind's literal job is to run your day-to-day on a 10% awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that drives your behavior is 90% unconsciously driven. So we
Mm-hmm.
are literally in a walking state of hypnosis every single day. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not present at all. Our unconscious mind, our beliefs, and our values will push our behaviors, especially when it comes to our own self-image and our own self-worth. Then that leads out to attracting partners that are the mirror image of that energy.
Okay, so two things. One, we're getting into, I guess, the law of attraction a little bit. Get it right? And I guess also talk a little bit about that. I mean, because we've been talking about relationships. I've talked about that on this show, but you want to talk a little bit about the energy and maybe explain for some people how those energy level, how the frequency works and whatnot.
Well, literally, if we go back again between the ages 0 to 7, we learn everything, or whether it's healthy or not, from our
Mm-hmm.
guardians. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, with your parents, if they didn't have a great relationship, or there was no intimacy that you saw, or laughing or happiness, or even the word love, or even saying the word love, so
Mm-hmm.
your unconscious mind views that as a normal relationship. So that's just literally laid down as, this is what we need to basically have as a normal relationship
Mm-hmm.
in a box as such, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
However, once again, it comes back to, well, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I in retrospect to my own self-image? And if I'm coming from a poor and conflicted self-image, how do I change that? Now, your mind's a very powerful tool. It's extremely
Mm-hmm.
powerful. And, I've worked with people that have been in therapy probably sometimes, 10 and 15 years, talking about the same things over and over again when it comes to external relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the external relationship. It's actually about what's going on inside your unconscious mind and the view
Mm-hmm.
that the relationship pattern has based
Mm-hmm.
on past programming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about understanding, well, hold on, when you talk about divorce rates, the thing is, if you don't have unconsciously connected beliefs and value systems, and you've got to actually understand what yours are too, which most of the
Mm-hmm.
time our belief structures aren't ours. They're our parents. We were given them. So sometimes even the voices in your head, you didn't put them there, they were put there.
Hmm. Hmm. I get it. I get it. So, I mean, so it comes back to, and one thing I'm hearing you say is, and I've seen it in my own life, and I think most people have seen it, is that we just continue to repeat the same things over and over and over. And so many times, especially in relationships, people, I think, people, unfortunately, many people have multiple divorces these days, right? And after a lot of times after the first divorce, they say, "Oh, I was with the wrong person," and "Oh, they just when I find that right person, then everything's going to be okay." And I read through a bunch of the you have glowing reviews on your website, by the way. I read through a bunch of those today, and just for those of you out there, Natalie's she's worked with people all over the world, and she's just got some amazing testimonials from her clients. But one of the things that one of the guys kind of alluded to, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, you helped him realize, it wasn't the relationship, it was him, it's us, right? It's the things that we bring to relationships that if we don't figure them out, we don't correct them, we're just bound to repeat it over and over and over, right?
You've said that perfectly, 100%, Jake. And that's the thing. It comes back to, well, what are my needs and my wants? And a lot of people don't even understand what they are, or they don't even understand the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things that us human beings tend to do, and we are programmed this way, is
Mm-hmm.
we're negative and pessimistic by nature. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a scenario. So if you went out and did something in your life and you had 10 people that were watching you, and 9 of those people said, wow, that was an amazing job, but one of them was negative, us humans tend to hold on to the negative.
Mm,
So what
mm-hmm,
happens in a relationship, the first thing I hear when people say, oh, and now I know what I don't want, the
mm,
amount of energy, that negative energy and value that comes with now I know what I don't want,
mm-hmm,
your mind goes, oh, that's important because it has a
mm,
high level of energy towards it. It's a value system.
mm-hmm.
So what do you think your mind and where do you think your energy is going to go? You're going to create what you don't want.
Right. So now we're going back to the law of attraction, basically, right? So the premise of the law of attraction is you want to think your mind does not pick up the negatives, right? So if you are focusing on getting rid of debt, for example, the just to take a monetary example outside of relationships, if your focus is I want to get rid of debt, well, then you're thinking about debt, you're actually going to attract more negative, as opposed to the opposite of debt would be abundance or financial freedom or financial abundance. So in that case, you'd want to think about financial abundance as opposed to the debt, right? So in relationships, is what you're saying is when we think about what we don't want in a relationship, that's the very thing we're attracting to ourselves.
Well, one of the
Huh.
things with the law of attraction is I always say
Mm-hmm.
to people, law of attraction is not it's not something that you do.
Mm-hmm.
It is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you understand, you're doing it all the time, every single day, unconsciously, 90% of the time, because
Yeah.
we are not aware and we do not live in present state. You have to practice and understand how your mind works and how to actually be present, how to actually operate in the now. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing with law of attraction, I tend to find with a lot of people is it comes sometimes from a space of lack. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I have to go and find abundance, or I have to go and think about this. You already are it.
Mm-hmm.
You've just not allowed yourself to actually open up that part because your programming is literally being more negative based on your consciousness of being pessimistic and negative by nature. Um, it takes practice to actually understand, well, hold on, where am I most of the time during the day? Now, your conscious
Mm-hmm.
mind will go back and forwards from the past and the future all the time. That's its job, in
Mm-hmm.
and out, in and out. And most people will operate from their past memory and energetic memory.
Mm-hmm.
That will then get pushed into the future, especially when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to relationships. And that's why when people say, oh my gosh, I've attracted another person that's really unhealthy for me. I'm a really smart person, but why does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because your unconscious still has
Mm-hmm.
the program running underneath that is based on your 0 to 7.
Gotcha. Okay, so now we've gone from law of attraction. We've stepped over. Some people might not have heard it, but we've stepped over into quantum physics a little bit, right? Because you said, whether you're talking about that perfect relationship or that ideal relationship, you already have it, or that ideal person that you want to be, you already have it. It already exists, and we would say in quantum physics, it exists within the quantum realm, but we just have not seen it with our physical eyes yet. Is that right?
Well, you're born that way. You're
Yeah.
literally born that way. You are
Mm-hmm.
born, and this is one thing that's really important for your listeners. I want really people to understand that there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. What you do need to understand is your mind. You need to understand the power of the consciousness, the unconsciousness, and also to your body. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people, we operate in our head all the time. So we've got this constant loop of the same thing going in and out, but it's getting from out of your head and into your heart space. This is where the power is, and you've
Mm-hmm.
always had it. But as humans too, Jake, when it comes to energy, whenever we're entering into a relationship where we may have had red flags in the past and we kind of flick
Mm-hmm.
them under the carpet and we ignore them, they
Right.
will show up. And they will show up again and again and again. And the reason why we end up in those circles is because we don't stand up for ourselves in the beginning and say, no, I'm not doing this again. this sounds familiar to me. I'm not going down that path. Because what happens if we say no to someone that we start dating? They may leave. But as humans, we chase. We try to hold on to, like, oh my gosh, what happens if they leave? You know what? If you're always speaking your authentic truth, let them leave, because they're not meant to be in your life. If you can't speak open and honestly about what works for you and what you need internally in yourself, that has to be reflected externally. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you need to say no.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of people do when they enter a relationship, especially that, someone that they really like, they don't want to scare them away, right? And so we all, to a certain degree, are going to put our best foot at the very least, we're putting our best foot forward, right? Right. And so with that, our truth gets silenced, muffled at best, right? But to go back to the fact that we're continuing this loop, right? And and I know that, I guess, from some of the research I've done, I think not just relationships, but something like 80% or more of everything we do every day is just coming from our unconscious mind. It's just programming that's running in the background. Like if just left unattended, people are just going to do the same thing today that they did yesterday, right? And so one of the things is that, right? And so we do that with simple things. We do that with our exercise or our diet, or the old adage of a body in motion tends to stay in motion, a body at rest tends to stay at rest. What we do today is so important because we're going to probably repeat what we do today tomorrow, right? And it's the same thing with relationships.
100%. Until we need to understand, hold on, if there's a particular pattern that you have showing up, you're the common denominator.
Sure, that's right. So how do we change? That? I mean, I think we've established that point, right? Like if you're having trouble in relationships, it's not because you keep finding a bunch of crazy women or a bunch of crazy men, right? You're right. That look in the mirror. You're the problem. I'm the problem. Whoever it is, if you're having problems, but there's power in that, isn't there? I mean, if you realize.
Honestly, you turn that mirror around, and there is so much power in ownership and awareness, and really deep diving into yourself and understanding, well, hold on, why am I trying to fill certain voids within myself with someone else? That never works. So the best way to understand it is, and that's when I work with people, it's like, well, what does your unconscious look like? What is it trying to communicate with you? What does a relationship mean? What are your wants? What are your needs? And what you sometimes think consciously of what you think they are, I'm telling you right now, your unconscious mind has got a totally different view to that.
Okay, I have a lot of different places I want to go with this, but let me just ask this question. I want to come back to wants and needs, but I want to begin with this question of why relationships? And I'm going to preface this by saying, way back 100 years ago when I was in college, I had a sociology professor who said that he wasn't just talking about relationships, but he was very specifically talking about marriage. And he argued, and I thought I was very taken by this thought. I was like, I didn't agree with him at the time, but he said marriage is just an economic relationship. That was what he had argued. And this guy's a sociologist, right? And he wasn't a relationship specialist, and perhaps he was bitter. I don't know. And I won't digress too much, but I did read a book once called The History of the Wife, right? And I teach history. I've taught American history for a long time, and the role of women in general, whether it's just in society or as a wife or in relationships, has changed dramatically. But in 2020, what is your opinion? Like, why relationships? Tell me why we should have them. What's is it just to make a external validation? Why relationships? Talk to me.
Well, the thing is, it's once again, it literally every single person, the way that they perception and then the way that they're programmed is so unique. And this is the thing, you can have like a blanket concept of what a relationship looks like, feels like, sounds like. But once again, if there's cultural programming, if there's religious programming, now consciously you may say, well, I don't want a relationship, but unconsciously you can totally be in conflict there, because if you've had, you know, a religious background where you've grown up and marriage is a very, you know, that's just what we do as humans, but then you grow up and you start to think and feel and operate in the world on your own, then you start to have value conflicts with yourself to go, well, hold on, I don't really know if that works for me anymore. But meanwhile, you've got your unconscious programming saying, well, a relationship's really important. However, I will always say, never go into an external relationship with another human being unless you are very, very well aware of who you are, what your needs are, what your wants are, what your values are, what your belief structures are, because otherwise you're going in blind and you're going to obviously go in consciously for 5 minutes, but then your unconscious mind's going to pick up and run with the same program. I'll always, in anything that I write, you know, my content that I write, you know, obviously it's aimed at relationships, but I will always preface this the fact that you must understand yourself at a very, very deep level when it comes to self-love and self-worth, because I always say, date yourself, understand who you are, because then when anything turns up external to you that doesn't serve you at your highest good, you won't enter that energy. It'll repel it.
Love it. Okay, I love it. So I'm thinking of all the people who might be out there in the different broad groups of categories, and there are some people, you know, have been in relationships most of their adult lives, and whether it's one or two or many, they go from relationship to relationship. Then there are other people who maybe go years, maybe a decade, and they're not in a relationship at all. Let me start with that second group, and the people who haven't been in relationships for a long time. Do you think that's because they're just happy? And I know we can't over globalize, but do you think that they're just happy by themselves, or do you think they're afraid of because of bad situations, or is that 0 to 7 programming? What are your thoughts on that? Let's start there, at least.
Definitely, I think there's a mix within there, Jake, of, you know, I know people myself that are very happy single. They love their life. And you know what? They're very open, though, to understanding if the right partner comes along, they'll know. They're not blocked off to having it, but they just love where they are and they love who they are. On the other side of that, where people repel relationships because they've had past hurt or pain, and this is the other thing too, never go into another relationship if you have not got to the source of the pain of the past relationship, because you'll just bring that in to the current one. And you will actually see that person through painful eyes from an unconscious point. So you'll literally verb out all of that pain from the past into that new relationship.
Got it. So that jumps us over to the other side of people who have been, you know, serial daters, or they've been in, you know, multiple relationships over a period of time, and they tend to, I am going to globalize here, because they do tend to say, oh, well, it was not the right person, right? And so, but this person, I just met this person, I've met the one, right? They're the one, but you're still bringing those subconscious programs. So, all right, let's speak to this, because I think that's a lot of people. So let's say there's someone who they haven't fixed all that stuff, and they're in a new relationship. They like the relationship, but they're struggling. Can they fix it in that relationship, or what advice would you have for that type of person?
Look, honestly, if someone knows that they have particular patterns that keep showing up for them, and they've entered a new relationship and they haven't maybe had a bit of a gap, and I always invite my clients to say, you know what, if you're coming out of a relationship or a marriage, please make a minimum 6 months just to heal yourself and be on your own, and really just deep dive into the things that did come up. Now, if you don't do that, there's also an element of that self-image part of why you can't be on your own. So we need to look at that as a separate scenario, because a lot of people will go into a relationship wanting that person to make them feel better or to fix them. That never works. It'll always end in disaster. And secondly, with that, is that if you go into a relationship, you must be aware of being able to be tolerant and communicate with someone effectively. Communication is an art form. We also don't learn that. And that was one of the things that us humans take for granted. You must understand how to listen consciously and presently with a partner. If you don't, what you're normally doing is your partner is talking to you and you already have the loop going in your mind about what you want to respond with. So that in itself then creates distance in a relationship.
Do you think that that's a problem a lot of people struggle with?
Yeah, a lot of people actually have no problem communicating, but there's a difference between listening and talking with each other versus at each other. Two very different things.
You can sit there and watch people say words back and forth like a tennis match of words, right? But are they hearing? Are they listening?
Correct.
So I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I wasn't super great at that in my life. I still might not be, and I'm with this show. I'm having to learn to listen to people a little bit more. So I'm working on that skill each and every week here on the Onward show.
Well, you know what, Jake? This is the thing, and like I said, I've been doing this for 12 years, but I also learn as I go along. We're just human beings, and I think that's the other thing too. You don't live in perfection; it doesn't exist. That will drive you crazy. We are all elements of different types of energies and patterns, but it's more about taking ownership of them and being aware of them, and really not forcing them onto someone else. So if you've done something that's you're not listening to a partner, you know what? Just say it. Hey, you know what? I actually didn't hear a thing that you just said then. Can we just go back and just redo that? So I would possibly say 90% of the time when I work with couples, the communication is one of the key things. Also too, Jake, the reason is because if you're not dealing with past pain or past hurts, that communication response, what will happen is unconsciously your unconscious will come up and go, oh gosh, this feels like something that happened even maybe 5 years ago. And you're actually sitting in that in a new relationship. So that's why it's so important to understand your own patterning and how to change that unconsciously.
Great stuff. So if you're talking with a couple and you said 90% of what couples are going to deal with is communication issues, I mean, what is a basic recommendation? What is the first thing you tell them? Are there exercises? Are there things that they can do? How would you suggest someone improve that communication skill?
So really, it's understanding the communication with themselves first. And understanding, secondly, that their partner is unique in their own way that they hear and they communicate with themselves as well. So there is always this assumption that when we use the word relationship or we go into a relationship that, oh, yeah, I know how to communicate. People don't. It is a practice. There is specific exercises and programs that I do take my clients through so that they learn to be present. Because I tell you what, majority of the time, your mind's off flipping around for thinking about 5 other things when your partner's trying to talk to you.
So do you think, I mean, in terms of learning to communicate with yourself, I mean, something that I have not done enough of, but I'm a big advocate of, I mean, does something like meditation help with that?
It does, but also too, there's an element of stillness that I do. There's also meditation that I recommend my clients go through on their own, but also too with their partner, just in silence. Then secondly, it's understanding their unconscious programs. So getting them to understand the communication from themselves inside into their mind, then that allows them to be more present with themselves and their partner.
I'm a huge believer in the need to be present, right? And almost all of our stress and anxiety is gonna be looking to the future, and all of our regret and depression is probably looking towards the past. And of course, even though I need to do so much of a better job of practicing it in my own life, we find our happiness in the present moment. Is that right?
We do. Happiness is not something at the end of the rainbow. Happiness is an ownership of choosing what you want right now.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing with relationships, it's really important. It is not your partner's job to make you happy. That's your
Sure.
job.
Absolutely. Well, let me extend on that a little bit. So we said, communication is vital, right? And we first got to learn to communicate with ourselves, and then learn to communicate with our partner. Um, and then in doing so, talk a little bit about needs and wants in a relationship. So to what extent should our needs and wants be fulfilled in a relationship? And what is asking too much of a partner, and what are safe boundaries, or what are healthy boundaries, I guess I should say?
Correct. So the needs and the wants basically are a layer around boundaries. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll be quite surprised at how many people don't have boundaries in relationships, especially when they start a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, it comes back to, oh gosh, if I put these boundaries in place, they may leave.
Mm-hmm.
So secondly, when we talk about conscious needs and wants, we also need to understand that value and that belief structure around our unconscious programming as well. Sometimes they can be quite different. So a need comes back to going, well, what's important to me? What works for
Mm-hmm.
me? What does my relationships look like? How do I respond? Am I reactive in a relationship versus being responsive? Because the thing is, most relationships and how we operate on a day-to-day basis, we are in reactive mode all
Mm-hmm.
day, every day, in
Mm-hmm.
flight or flight response. So I take people through to understand, well, what is a need in your relationship?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people end up quite blank because they're like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important. Now, a need is a fundamental need. So, for example, to be spoken to respectfully,
Mm-hmm.
that's a need. A want, maybe, well, I would like to go with my partner out once a week. That can
Mm-hmm.
be flexible. You know what I mean? But the
Sure.
wants are really around boundaries and healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of comes back to, like you said, knowing yourself, your relationship with yourself first, right? And the ability to, well, know yourself and understand yourself is tied, as you mentioned, to self-image, right?
It is. It's acceptance. If you think about even all your viewers listening, it's like, when do you accept yourself? And I mean 100% accept yourself for who you are and all your awesomeness.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't.
So if a lot of people don't do that and they struggle with that, what would you tell someone, if a single person or one-on-one, whatever it is, and they're struggling with self-image, and what recommendation do you have to a person like that to improve their self-image? What do they need to do?
So really, I take them through a series of exercises, when I work with them, so they can actually really understand their own view of their
Mm-hmm.
unconscious. So there's a particular practices that I take people through around actually visualization. So whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, there's a specific thing that comes up for each people, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really viewing your own self-image unconsciously and how that looks. Then what we do is we go
Hmm.
into that. What does love mean? And once again, if you think about the word
Mm-hmm.
love, it'll always go externally, never internally.
Hmm. Very interesting. So I like that. So self-image is, you start with getting outside of yourself and basically looking at and viewing yourself. Tell me a little bit more about that. That's super interesting.
Yeah. So basically, it's a process that I take people through around understanding, connecting in with what their consciousness does, how their unconsciousness views themselves. So there's a series of layers of, hypnotic elements that I'll take them through. So really
Hmm.
what it is, it's about taking people out of their waking state of hypnosis into awareness so they can actually view what's going on internally in their unconscious mind, which comes up in normally pictures or videos in color on black and white. It's quite
Hmm.
amazing how every person creates it and what it
Hmm.
actually does. But that's
Hmm.
the power of, that's why whenever It doesn't matter whether I'm working with someone with a relationship or lifestyle or anything external, I will always bring it back to, do you know how your mind works? And this is why it's doing what it's doing.
The unconscious mind, just to further what you just said, kind of reiterate, it sees in pictures, right?
Yeah. So if you think about it, like I said earlier, if you've got a video camera, you know, your head is a video camera between age of 0 to 7, your eyes are the lens to the world. So what happens is your mind takes snapshots all the time of what's happening, and it lays it down in pictures, stills, color, black and white. It really depends on someone's programming and how they've actually absorbed that. So a lot of people, when I take them through whatever it may be, they'll be quite surprised. I'll be like, where did that picture, where did that image just come from? Why did I get that black and white photo of my dad when I was 5?
Fascinating. So this reminds me a little bit, and I want to come back to that, but this reminds me a little bit of some of Joe Dispenza's work with his, his newest book, Becoming Supernatural. He talks a lot about meditation. I mean, most of his work is centered around meditation and changing the subconscious mind. The first book I read from him was Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
and so,
we're not ourselves. We're a programmed version of ourselves because we get programmed by our guardians.
So that's a lot what you do is you go in there and you work with clients and you help them, I guess, because a lot of times I don't even think we understand what our unconscious programming is. We just know maybe I don't like how I do this or that, or maybe I don't have a great relationship with money, or maybe my health, or relationships. That's what we're talking about right now. And so you actually help your clients dig into that, figure out what that programming is, and then reprogram
Change it. Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
love
this
that.
is the thing, I think a lot of people are really discounting the power that they have. So once you're actually given the tools, and that's what I give my clients, I give my clients the tools to be able to understand how they operate, why the communication is coming up, so they can actually reprogram it on their own. And it comes back to practice of consciousness. We must be conscious because that's actually the only time we have.
Right. So Eckhart Tolle wrote the book. I don't know if you read it, The Power of Now. Are you familiar with that book?
Right. I am familiar with that book, yeah.
And I mean, it makes so much sense, right? But when I first read it, I was like, I mean,
it takes a while. You're kind of like, I've got to read that page 3 times.
Yeah, it's not a super easy read, right? I mean, it takes a little bit to get your mind wrapped around this. But hey, to all the viewers out there tonight, I love what Natalie's talking about, and about the fact that whether it's relationships, whether it's your health, whether it's, because you don't only do relationships, you work with relationships, but one of the quotes from your website is you say, so you're a strong believer in a holistic approach to well-being, right? So that's just not like curing, one thing. I mean, you tell me a little bit about that and how it all fits together with relationships. While you do that, I'm going to go ahead and put your website in the comments. So go ahead and tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the main thing is, I guess, when people have like a road bump in their life, whether it's a relationship or career or health, what they'll do, they'll go and actually just fix that, in inverted commas. They'll go and seek someone or try and mend that or whatever it is. That's a side effect of what's going in your unconsciousness to do with your self-image. So anything to do with whether it's food addiction, alcohol, drugs, they're all just side effects. Same with depression and anxiety. They are a side effect of a poor and conflicted self-image. So I actually I'll take that back a step. So the thing is, when you look at those things, they're symptoms of current reality of what's going on in your life. I get to the root cause, and literally once you find the root cause, all of that falls over. So instead of lining up, 20 dominoes and talking about those 20 dominoes for the next 5 years, we go to the root cause. The root cause is in your unconscious, connected to your self-image and how you operate from a poor and conflicted most of the day.
I love it. Okay, so it comes back to that one domino, that self-image, and it's, I mean, half of America's trying to lose weight at any given
Yeah.
time, right? Right. I've had a
Mhm.
couple of health and fitness people on the show, and at any given time, people are trying to lose weight, and people always think, well, I'm gonna do keto, or I'm gonna be
Yeah.
vegan, or I'm gonna be, if I become vegetarian, that's gonna fix it, right? And we do the calories in, calories out, and though that might work scientific, or just in terms of chemistry for a little while, it
Yeah.
doesn't. That's fixing those other dominoes, right? It's not starting with that domino that's causing all the problems, and that's what you address, right?
Correct. So one of the biggest things is, I've worked with people that are, sometimes quite overweight, and they've talked about, having a gastric band done. Now, the gastric band's been done, and,
Mhm.
you can shrink your body or make your body bigger or smaller, but I tell you what, your self-image is going to stay the same. And this is the issue. So, you could lose 20 or 30 kilos, but you can still look in the mirror and still do not like who you see, because your self-image
Yeah.
is the driver of your behavior. So,
Hmm.
that's why too, a lot of people will go externally. Dieting is externally. You're trying to fix something symptomatic versus your
Mm,
self-image. And it all comes back to self-love and self-worth. If you
yeah.
actually love yourself at a deep level and know your worth as a human being and what you have to offer here, no one's here by accident. And that's another
Mm,
thing. We don't
mm,
end up on earth by accident. We're here for a reason. We're here to do
mm,
something to help other people.
mm-hmm.
But if you stay on the treadmill of dieting and understanding, like, well, why is this not working? Because you're not treating the root cause.
I love that. And it just covers everything, right? And some people struggle with weight, people struggle with relationships. And it all comes back to the self-image issues. And I did have a guy on the show once who talked about weight loss, and he said, I can help you lose 100 pounds, but if we don't change your mindset about that, then you're a fat guy in a skinny body, or a fat girl in a
Absolutely.
skinny body, right? Because you still have that mentality, right? So I love that. So I've got your website up here.
Thank you.
Any of you listening here, you're resonating with what Natalie's saying, and whether it's relationships, whether it's weight loss, self-image, whatever issues you're really struggling with, it really comes back to this unconscious programming that in most cases has probably been there since our first years of life, and whether it's exposed itself earlier on in life or whatever it is, if you're struggling with those things, you've got to get to the bottom of it, and
Yeah.
it's
And that's one thing that's really important for people to understand. Your unconscious mind's not out to get you at all.
mm,
It's not trying to harm you. It's actually trying to protect you. However,
mhm,
it doesn't think, it just acts. It's the most reactive tool that you have, and it will keep you in flight or flight response whether or
mhm,
not it's healthy or not. So
mhm,
that's the thing, and that's the key of understanding the value of what drives your behavior. So for
mhm,
example, especially with weight loss, people will say, I know I'm not meant to eat that, but what they do is say, I don't want to eat that. What your mind does, it takes away don't, and then what do? You end up
mm,
eating it.
huh huh well, it's just like we were talking about with debt earlier, right? If you're trying to get rid of debt, don't think about debt, think about abundance, right? So if you're flipping that with food, it's not like I don't want to eat that pizza, right? You think about, I guess, how do you do that? Do you flip it and think I want to eat broccoli? What do you do? How do you
Well,
do that?
literally, it's understanding each person's unique structure around their
Got it.
limitation and their lack of belief of what their communication style is with themselves. But once
Mm-hmm.
again, um, dieting and all of the food, we also go into the fact that even with anxiety, that's also can be driven by food. It's not just a mental thing. If you're
Mm-hmm.
literally seriously undernourishing yourself and not feeding your brain, you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to work as well.
Mm-hmm. So, I love everything you're sharing. I love that we came on here to talk about relationships, but it really, and I kind of defined it and said we're talking about romantic relationships or intimate relationships, but but it's really kind of coming back over and over and over that it all starts with the relationship with yourself.
It absolutely does.
I love that.
100%.
I love that. If you guys are struggling out there with any, and so many people are, you're struggling with self-image issues or weight or relationship, whatever it is. Natalie actually told me before the show that she is offering free 30-minute strategy sessions for any of my viewers out there tonight, or if you're on the replay and you're like, I'm just struggling in life. My relationships are struggling. My health is struggling. I guess you also do you deal with like money and mindset? I mean, does that work with that too?
It's the same thing.
It's
Once again,
money. Does money come back to self-image as well?
it's a lack of perception. So
Mm,
it's perceived, and we do have money stories from 0 to 7. Money doesn't grow on trees. You've got to work really hard for money. But once
mhm,
again, if you think about money, that may not be the root cause. The root cause might be my worthiness of actually feeling like I'm capable of doing that.
hmm. Man, that's some deep stuff. So how do you do that? I mean, if someone doesn't feel worthy, like I've heard that, on this show over the course of, 7 months or so, and discussions I've had with people, a lot of people out there don't feel worthy. They don't feel worthy of wealth or money. They don't feel worthy of, good relationships.
Mm.
What is the first, and I know it's kind of individual with different people, but where would you start if you're talking to somebody who they're listening right now? Where would you begin to help someone understand that they are worthy? And you said, hey, we're put here for a purpose, right? And I believe that too. So how does that begin? How does that conversation begin?
So all of those things that you just spoke about, we are programmed to validate those things as a part of our ourselves. They're all external things.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, it once again, it comes back to going, you know what? I am an amazing, powerful human being. And if I don't love myself wholly and physically as who I am, none of that stuff externally is going to matter. I know some people that are very, very, very wealthy, and their lack of self-love for themselves is really low. So
Hmm.
once again, that's a programming mechanism of going, well, hold on, what is abundance? We go external. What is money? It's external.
Mm-hmm.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to come back to you are worthy as you are. And if there's things that you choose to work on because you're not happy with your life, that's where you start. You don't start on all the external things. They're a side effect. Once again, back to the root cause. You're the
Mm-hmm.
root cause. Your unconscious programming is the root cause.
Hmm. Super good stuff. Yeah, you're right. I mean, so many people just have a laundry list of you know 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 things that when I get this job or I lose this much weight or I meet this person that I will be okay and happy. I mean, what's something you could recommend that people start doing today or tomorrow? They wake up tomorrow. What would you recommend? How do you practice self-love? Someone who's
So for
struggling with self-love.
me, each individual person obviously unique, but for me, the way that I nurture myself is, I'm very healthy. I go to the gym. I've been in the gyms for 20 years. I feed myself really well, because that's a level of self-love for myself, because you know what? We've only got one body. We
Right.
can't go to an organ shop and buy a new liver or something. We've got
Mm-hmm.
to have a high level of respect for ourselves and our body.
Mm-hmm.
So it really just is about also understanding that people, like we said earlier, think that there's something wrong with them. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't understand themselves. And that's all it is. I love journaling. I think journaling is an amazing thing for people to get in touch with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things too, like I have a lot of people that will say, well, I did a money course and I wrote down that I'm worthy and I'm all this. But once
Mm-hmm.
again, you're putting all the value on the money, the external. What about yourself?
Mm.
What's for you will never miss you unless you are conscious and you're living a conscious life and creating what you want to create. You can create whatever you want. Because I tell you what, whether it's negative or positive, it'll still show up in whatever form. Once again, law of attraction is not something that you do. It is who you are. So if something's showing up on the outside, where people always say to me like, oh my gosh, this is always happening to me. I'm like, well, what's going on underneath? What is your self-image doing? What part of your consciousness is driving, unconscious is driving that behavior?
So I totally agree with that. And I think a lot of times people think, or they say, I want to be like this, or I want to do that, or I want to be a millionaire, or I want to be fit, or whatever it is. And isn't it more just not having whatever that is, but rather being what that is?
Absolutely.
Right?
It's we're human doings most of the time. We're doing so much. They're actually missing out on the being. So what is the being? And once again, when we're doing, we're validating. We're concerned about what other people think. What happens if I do this and someone says something? And once again, that's a huge programming thing with a lot of my clients. They won't go do something because they're concerned about what their family will think or their friends will think. And I'm like, well, make sure when you get to 75 or 80 and you're on your deathbed that you don't say, oh, probably should have done that and I'm regretting that now. Regret.
Yeah, regret's a terrible thing. I don't know if you know who Gary Vee is, but he talks. Do you know Gary Vee? He talks a ton about that, right? He said there's nothing worse than just go to a nursing home. He said you're having trouble getting motivated, go to a nursing home and talk to people there and hear their stories of regret. And failure's okay, but get to the end of your life and you just regret the fact that you didn't give it your all. It's a terrible, terrible thing.
It is. And, one of the biggest things I always say, to people when they say, oh, well, I meant to do it this way or I meant to go down this path. I'm like, who said? Who made that rule? Now, if your parents made that rule and that rule doesn't serve you, you need to change it because you're in your life.
Let me follow up with that. You said I meant to do something. Does that mean like you feel like there's something that I hate to use the word predestined, but something that I think a lot of times, and this was another question I want to ask you about, but I think a lot of times people try and figure out, what am I supposed to do in life? What am I supposed to be? A doctor? Am I supposed to be a lawyer? Am I supposed to start my own business? How do I identify myself? And so I think people have those questions, right? And let me let you talk to that, and then I have another follow up after that.
Yeah, so I think there's so much pressure on the way that we're brought up around finding your purpose or being on your life path. And, it'll always come back to the same thing when I'm working with anyone. You are your purpose. You were already born into purpose by being you. However, if you're moving away from the core of who you are based on your programming, but if you're shifting yourself and putting on different masks in different audiences and around different people, you are totally off purpose of yourself. If you are 100% present, in love, understanding who you are, know what your worth is, everything in front of you opens up. So your consciousness becomes so much more open. You're not operating in restriction. You're operating out in open awareness. Everything that you need will find you.
I love that.
Purpose is to be you. You were born it. But we get layered. We get programmed. So we've got to take that off. That's the core. And I'll tell you what, when I see people wake themselves up and I can see it in their eyes, that's worth more than $1 million.
I love it. And you see it sometimes in people, right? I taught history in public schools for a lot of years, and sometimes you'll just see, whether it's at school or through the Onward show or whatever it is, sometimes you just see people, they get it, right? And all of a sudden they get it and they go, oh, like I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not anymore, right? And there's so much freedom in just being 100% authentic with who you are, right? And then at that point, like you said, whatever's supposed to be in your life is just going to find you.
Absolutely. You know, what is for you will never miss you, but it will miss you if you're living in constriction and you're living in what you're
Mm,
concerned about what other people think. And, you know, we don't know, Jake, how long we have on this earth. We really don't. And every minute that goes by that you're not conscious and aware and really loving who you are and what is laid for you,
mm-hmm.
every minute's lost because we just don't know how long we have.
I love that. And, I just had a few moments this week really where I was just, I super believe in living in the moment, right? I super believe I'm not great at it. I'm not.
We code it out. We flip it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. But, I had a few moments this week where I was just, I live over here in Houston, Texas, and it was kind of cold and rainy. And I've got about a 40-minute commute to my school, which I actually enjoy. And it just hit me. I was like that opening in in Eckhart Tolle's book of where he sits on the park bench and he's just like, oh my gosh, like here, this is it. Like I get it. Like I'm here. I'm present. I felt that. Like I felt that this week just driving to work a couple of times, and something as simple as just like I turned the music off. I love Audible. I love listening to books on Audible, but I turned off Audible. I turned off the music, and I just kind of was in the moment, and it felt so good. It reminded me of that opening in his book, The Power of Now, how good it is just to enjoy the moment, right? The present moment. I love that.
It is so powerful. And, you know, the more that you allow yourself, so allow is a big thing. It's giving yourself permission to do it. And it is quite uncomfortable because, too, our minds are so programmed for
Hmm.
familiarity. That's what we do. We're kind of, kind of back to caveman days where it's like, well, if I jump out of the pack, I'm going to get eaten. So, an element
Hmm.
of that is still in our DNA and our hardwired for I've got to be in that familiar feeling. So the minute that you step out into unfamiliarity, your mind's like, oh,
Hmm.
no, got to pull you back in. And even your body
Hmm.
feels that. So
Hmm.
that's quite unfamiliar to bodies, when we step into being still and present with our breathing. And one thing that people really struggle with is
Hmm.
being still with themselves and
Hmm.
breathing. And a lot of people don't even breathe properly, Jake. They're so
Hmm.
high in their breathing, they're not even breathing correctly. And the thoughts that people just can't sit still with, that's
Hmm.
the power of understanding that that's really a good thing.
I've got so many follow-up questions. So many different places to go. One, I'd love you to teach a mini class on how to breathe right here, and I might come back to that.
Yeah.
Before it leaves my mind, I do want to come back to relationships a little bit because we were talking about really, I guess the foundation is our relationship with ourselves, and a lot of that comes back to our subconscious programming. But there's two questions I have follow up about relationships, and one is the issue of you had a really beautiful post on Facebook a couple of days ago about a soulmate, right? Where you had this wonderful, eloquent post just talking about what it's like when the right person walks into your life and what that relationship is like. Do you believe in the notion of soulmates? Could you talk on that?
I'm more of a soul connection
Okay.
type of person. So I think, we all have soul mates in relation to, particular friends and whether it's work colleagues that come in. Because once again, no one arrives by accident. They're all there to teach us something, whether or not they stay for a minute or they stay for a little while. They're
Mm-hmm.
always a reflection for us to learn a deeper thing about ourselves. But if we don't take that opportunity, they'll just keep showing up. So when it comes to, I think, soulmate, twin flame, I think there's probably a little bit too much energy being placed on that. But once again, it comes back to your soul connection with yourself. So a lot of the posts that I put up, it's about, well, if that's what you want in a partner, make sure that's who you are inside yourself as well. So there was another one recently that I put up around, how to hold a man's heart, because men are programmed to be quite hard and cover their hearts and,
Mm-hmm.
tough guys. That's what you're programmed with.
Sure.
And a lot of women can go in relationships just kind of treating a man like, oh, he can't get broken or he can't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. You've really got to understand men are just like us. We're just like women. They want to be loved and want to be unconditionally loved, to love ourselves, but also to be loved with who we are, and to be seen for who we are with all our flaws, and not have to cover them. So holding someone else's heart in a relationship, you just got to make sure you can hold your own really well. Because if you don't love your own heart, you're not going to do a great job in someone else's.
That was also a beautiful post, and I appreciate you bringing that up as well. Let me go back just a little bit more. In a relationship where maybe there's baggage there. I mean, is that something that couples are going to be able to work through? Can they figure out themselves and figure out the stuff you're talking about? Is that something that you can work through in a relationship?
Absolutely. I've had couples on the verge of divorce, and really volatile relationships that they've turned around. And the reason why they've turned it around is because they've stopped and realized that it's not the partner's responsibility. It's their responsibility individually to look at their own, behaviors and what they're not owning. Ownership is huge. If you don't own something, you'll always push it onto someone else, and that just does not work. Then once you look at that individually, then you can come back together, and really a lot of the relationships over time lose their tolerance and acceptance for their partner. So one thing too that's really important, the way that I work, is like if I have a partner, one person ring me and say, look, I want my husband or my wife to come and see you. I'm like, that doesn't work. No. We're not trying to fix each other here. We're just trying to learn about who we are. Now, if that person wants to come because they want to come, great. But we're not dragging anyone off to therapy. That just does not work.
It just doesn't work. I mean, same thing with like drugs and alcohol, right? If somebody doesn't want to quit, they're not going to quit, right?
They're not. But once again, that comes back to one question that's really important for most people is, like, I always ask people, when was the first time you never felt enough? And that's where it starts. Because I don't know about you or any of your listeners, but, I wasn't taught self-love as a child or feeling like I was ever enough. We're not taught that. And that's where relationships also can get in a lot of trouble.
What about unconditional love, right? I mean, the Bible talks about, 3 different types of love, and agape and eros and phileo, whatever, right? I don't know how familiar you are with those terms, but there's different types of love. And to what extent, is there unconditional love in intimate relationships? Because, I mean, do you want to love someone unconditionally? Because, I mean, if someone's abusing you or something like that, do you still love them, but you got to get out of it? Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I get asked that question a lot. So, unconditional love is a feeling that we're giving someone in total acceptance. So we're accepting them for who they are and all their flaws and how they come to us. However, it comes back to where the boundaries are. So unconditional love in itself is unconditional. Relationships then move into, there will be conditions, because you've got to have healthy boundaries. So you can't have an abusive partner. Now, some people may think that they love that person unconditionally, but they will see them through past that abuse. But that comes back to, well, the relationship has a condition. You can't speak to me or treat me like that. I will love you from my depth of my own love that I have for myself, but that does not mean that that is acceptable, or I will continue to put up with that behavior. You must have healthy boundaries, because if you don't have healthy boundaries, that's where that unconditional love can get very blurred. Unconditional love is an energy that you give out based on your own level of love, that you accept them, but there is the boundaries that must also be adhered to. Because if you have a really bad habits or boundaries that move and they're not healthy, love will just disappear out of that altogether, whether or not it's unconditional, whatever you want to label it as. That will just disappear anyway.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Is there one thing, and kind of wrapping up, is there one thing that I guess maybe you've already said it's communication, but is there one thing that couples struggle with more than anything else that you see?
Yeah, talking about intimacy and sex and what kind of open conversations they have around that. That also is a really, really hard thing.
Which would also tie back into communication, right? The inability to both communicate your needs and wants and also hear, more importantly, probably hearing the needs and wants of your partner.
Absolutely. I always talk to people that are potentially, going down the path of being married, and it's like, well, have you spoken about your sex lives? Like what your sex drive's like? What does that mean to you? And people are just, they don't talk about it because a lot of the time it's very uncomfortable because it comes back to our programming. So if you've come up from a family that you just, sex and all that stuff is not spoken about, you just won't talk about it because your unconscious mind's like, nope, we don't talk about that. So you'll go in blind, and then 6 months, 12 months later, you have friction and an issue about meeting each other's needs.
So I mean, it can get really tricky, right? I mean, there's a lot of different areas of compatibility. I mean, how important is compatibility in a relationship?
Once again, it comes back to what unconscious programming or perception is compatibility to each person. So that's the power of understanding what it means to each person, then understanding the partner and going, wow, that was really different to what I thought. Can you work through that and have a balance? 100%. But you've got to have, from all the work that I've done, couples that really flourish, Jake, and really work through the depths of pain, they've got around an 80% unconscious matched belief structures and value systems on particular things in their lives. So career, relationship, sex, lifestyles, all of those kind of things. They're very similar, and there may be a few different ones, but they understand that.
So their core beliefs, core values are all going to be very similar.
Around 80%, yeah.
Okay, so that's values. Does that how does that relate to like lifestyle, like I don't know, like diet, bedtimes, activities, things like that? Is that part of it, or does
Yeah, it
is that
is.
not part?
Yeah, because I know some of my clients, they're very fit, and they will just not date anyone that's not fit or doesn't exercise or doesn't eat well. Like if someone sees McDonald's as a food group, they're out. They're like, no. It's not a judgmental thing. It's just the fact that that's who they are. Now, if you see someone as who they are and you move into that, well, you're accepting it. But if you have a really strong unconscious belief and value that that's really not going to work for you, but you ignore it, it's going to come up eventually. So they're really important.
Okay, so compatibility is super important.
100%. And it's not just, the visual either. And that's the other thing too, where a lot of people will have, the instant connection and the lust, but it's like, hold on, what about the emotional layers there? You've got to understand those emotional layers. Like, it's great to be attracted to someone. Don't get me wrong. That's really important. But once that starts to kind of bypass and you've got that connection physically, you've got to go into the deeper levels of understanding the emotional connections.
How long would you recommend someone date before they get married?
Oh, look, honestly, it would be between, from history, 18 months to 2 years.
Oh, really? You think that long?
Yeah.
Huh.
That's just couples that are coming off the top of my head that I know that have done that. But once again, they've never, those people that are on the top of my mind right there, they don't put marriage as a pressure, or they didn't. It was just like, you know what? We've just got an amazing relationship. Whether we get married or not, it doesn't actually matter.
Doesn't really matter. Yeah.
It's that pressure too, and it's like, well, once you get married, then you get engaged, then you get married and then have children. It's like, whoa, who said?
Gotcha. Man, so much interesting information you shared tonight, and I really I just really think everything you shared is so helpful to me and to our listeners. Once again, I just want to reiterate to the listeners, whether you're live or on replay, I've got Natalie's website in the comments there. She's offering a free 30-minute strategy call. Whether you're dealing with weight loss issues, relationship issues, money issues, whatever it is, it all really comes back to what she talked about tonight, which is what's going on in your unconscious mind. And a lot of that was put in there, probably without even knowing it, in your first years of life. So I've read reviews, and I've looked at so many things that her clients have had to say, and she does a really great job helping people unpack those things, and get to the root cause of what's going on with people in their lives. So if there's something you're struggling with, something you're dealing with, reach out to Natalie. Find her on Facebook, go to her website. I'll put you in touch with her, whatever it is. Again, she's offering a free 30-minute strategy session to help you, deal with some of those issues that people might be dealing with. Hey, it's a tough world we're living in these days, and I'm a huge believer in, asking for help and, going to people who can help us, improve our lives. That's what this whole show is about. It's about helping ordinary people live extraordinary lives. So Natalie, with the last few moments we have here, you talked about breathing. Could you tell us how should we be breathing? You said most people aren't breathing right. Let's finish with that, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah. So literally, it's just a practice of where you sit still and you concentrate on breathing right from the bottom of your lungs. So a lot of people will shallow breathe. Mm-hmm. And it literally is just about that full breath in and out all the way down. So if you think about a baby's belly, right? When a baby breathes, their belly goes all the way out and all the way back in. Mm-hmm. That's what we need to do. And it helps the oxygen. It helps get the carbon dioxide out of our body. And literally it's just breathing in and out, deep breaths, for a full 5 minutes.
For 5 minutes.
5 minutes in stillness. Now, what's going to happen is when you first start doing that, you're going to get itchy, you're going to move around, you're going to want to kind of move because it's unfamiliar to your body. Breathing is so powerful, especially if you're whether you're anxious or feeling a bit off. Check in on your breathing. Am I breathing shallow? Am I breathing deeply? But also, too, it calms your mind. You'll be amazed at how easily it will calm your mind.
So in a previous conversation, you said that was something you advocate and something you practice each day, right? I mean, and it's not like you have to carve out an entire hour to do this, right? No. I mean, you said 5 minutes can be very effective.
100%. Like even I have people that even struggle to do a minute or 2 minutes when I first start working with them, just because because most people don't sit still. There's power in stillness.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah. So breathe.
Breathe. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to wrap up with?
No, thank you. It's just been such a pleasure, and the questions and your show's just been amazing. So thank you again, and privilege. And I hope whoever hears it, something lands for them, and they just get what they need from it. And as you said, I'm here. Reach out if you need anything. I'm happy to help.
Absolutely. Well, we're all about changing lives here at Onward, and I know that's what you've dedicated your life to. So I appreciate you hanging out here with us and sharing such amazing information with our listeners tonight. Natalie, thanks for being on Onward. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
You guys have a great evening, and I'll see you all again next week. Y'all take care. Have a good evening.